An older married couple strolled leisurely along the shore as the sun began its slow descent. Their secluded and heavily guarded estate in Byron Bay had somehow been breached by a reporter. Hidden in the bushes, he snapped a series of photos that soon made the front pages of newspapers. The couple was seen emerging from the water after a swim. They dried off slowly, the woman gathering towels, as they headed back toward their terrace. The husband mumbled something under his breath, while his wife stared off into the distance, her face marked by a deep sense of boredom and indifference. Back in 1986, their film Crocodile Dundee caused an international sensation. Paul Hogan, an unknown Australian actor at the time, won a Golden Globe for Best Actor. While the Oscar slipped into American hands, Hogan's success was more than enough. Women were smitten with him, and even though he would claim his Oscar in 1987, his rise to fame was already in full swing. His character, Mick Dundee, perfectly captured the mid-80s zeitgeist, a time of wild fashion trends and a generation of independent women drinking juice and doing aerobics. Many women, fed up with life in big cities, flocked to the distant southern continent, hoping to find a protector like Dundee. Rough around the edges, maybe a little scarred from a tussle with an alligator, but reliable. He embodied everything that those pampered, sensitive office boys in their iron shirts weren't. Tour companies were raking in the cash, with long lines of tourists stretching for miles at Kakadu National Park. Women no longer wanted Rambo or Indiana Jones, they craved the untamed spirit of Crocodile Dundee. 27-year-old Linda, loading her bags onto a flight from Los Angeles to Sydney, had no idea the film would be a massive hit. The shoot was expected to last 3 months, and she'd made arrangements for her beloved pet to stay with friends during that time. When she first laid eyes on Paul Hogan, wearing some ridiculous colorful shorts, she couldn't have imagined he'd become her husband. Linda was used to charming, talkative playboys, but this guy barely said a word, as if he'd swallowed his tongue. From the very beginning, things just didn't click between them, neither professionally nor personally. Linda even complained to producer John Cornell that she couldn't connect with her co-star. Why couldn't they cast someone from the States? She grumbled. To her, Paul Hogan was just a rough, unrefined country boy, completely unsuitable for the part. But everything changed one night after shooting in the remote Australian wilderness, when Paul and Linda found themselves alone. The camp had settled down, and they sat by the fire in silence. Linda, as usual, was quiet, masking her disdain, while Paul was silent because he simply didn't know what to say to such a polished, high society type. Out of nowhere, Paul suggested, "How about a drink?" I don't usually drink, but back in the day, after hanging out with the boys on the bridge, we'd grab a couple when we hit the ground. What followed was a long conversation. At one point, Paul took off his jacket and gently draped it over Linda's shoulders. She felt warm and unexpectedly at ease. That night marked a shift in their dynamic. By the end of the shoot, Linda no longer saw Paul as some uncouth backwoodsman. She began to find him quirky, a bit introverted, but overall quite likable. Paul, in turn, realized Linda was just one of the guys, fun, full of energy, unbothered by the occasional crude joke, and definitely not someone putting on airs. The two became close during filming, often sitting together during breaks, laughing at jokes. Soon enough, Paul realized he had fallen for her. One day, while touching up Linda's makeup, the makeup artist playfully warned her, "Careful, girl. You might end up crying over him. He's married, you know. His wife won't take kindly to anyone standing in her way." Linda brushed it off, saying, "So what? A wife? Big deal." She didn't see her fling with Paul as anything serious. Sure, they'd slept together a couple of times, but as far as Linda was concerned, it was all part of getting into character as on-screen lovers. When filming wrapped, Linda had already postponed her flight back to the States 3 times, continuously changing her ticket. The real reason? Paul. Strong, rugged, with a sarcastic wit and lean, muscular build, and, above all, irresistibly charming. But eventually, she had to go home. The office romance lingered in her mind, but she knew there wasn't much future in it. 6 months later, when Linda received a call from producer John Cornell inviting her back to Australia for the movie's post-production, she eagerly began packing her bags. But when she saw Paul Hogan at the airport, she felt an overwhelming rush of emotions, and without hesitation, she threw herself into his arms, surprised by the intensity of her feelings. The carefree blonde American couldn't have imagined what lay ahead. Paul's wife, Nolene Hogan, wasn't about to let go of her husband without a fight. Enraged by her husband's late-life infatuation with a foreign flirt, Nolene enlisted the help of family, friends, and even Australia's biggest newspapers in her war to keep him. Paul could never forget the day he first laid eyes on 18-year-old Nolene. She was playful, sharp-tongued, and wearing a short skirt, a combination that instantly caught his attention. They started dating, and soon after, Nolene announced she was pregnant. With no other choice, they tied the knot. By the time Paul was 22, he was already a father of 3 and working hard to support his family. He became a rigger, then a crane operator, earning a decent wage, but something was missing in his life. Even back then, his knack for comedy began to show. In the evenings, sitting in the pub with his mates over a pint, Paul would hilariously mimic politicians and celebrities, leaving everyone in stitches. Women often glanced his way, which didn't help Nolene's mood. Her friends thought she had landed a real gem, but Nolene wasn't so sure. One day, for a laugh, Paul sent a letter to the TV talent show New Faces. He introduced himself as Paul Hogan from Lightning Ridge, New South Wales, claiming to be an expert tap dancer and the best knife thrower in his village. 2 weeks later, he was invited to appear on the show. There was no knife throwing involved, but Paul won over the audience by staging a mock brawl with the assistants and flipping a table in the studio. The crowd cheered for the Wildman, with laughter and applause filling the room. His sharp, witty jabs hit the mark, leaving the judges red-faced while the audience doubled over in laughter. After such an impactful debut, Paul was offered a role hosting a comedy show on television. He worked nights shooting the show and was still on the job at Sydney's port by 7 in the morning as a rigger. When Paul returned home, Nolene was waiting for him, pregnant with his 4th child. Despite family obligations, his career was booming. He soon launched his own show, The Paul Hogan Show. In 1985, Hogan was honored with the title of Man of the Year. But in his head was already ripening a new idea. A film about a harsh hermit who catches crocodiles in the wilds of Australia, but one day encounters civilization. Paul wrote the script in just 3 weeks. Together with producer John Cornell, they invested their own money in the project. Hogan even agreed to play the role of Mick Dundee for free. However, for the main female role, they decided to invite an actress from America. Paul dreamed of getting Michelle Pfeiffer, but the budget of the project did not allow such a scope. Cornell found Linda Kozlowski's resume. Paul looked over her tape a few times and decided, not bad, pretty. Linda desperately needed the money and agreed to participate. The movie Crocodile Dundee was a sensation, collecting $370 million with a modest investment of $3 million. Around the actors immediately erupted scandal. The press and the public were shocked. How is it that Paul Hogan, a folk hero, left his wife, with whom he was together for almost 30 years, for the sake of a young American? Nolene gave numerous interviews and did not miss a chance to appear on every talk show, whether it was a political debate or cooking programs. Paul tried to justify himself, explaining that their marriage had long exhausted itself. The older children grew up, they had separate bedrooms. However, the divorce process dragged on for a long time until it was finally finalized. As soon as the divorce became official, Paul immediately set a wedding date with Linda, May 5, 1990. Linda ordered a gown that exactly replicated Princess Diana's lavish outfit, lavish, hand-embroidered. As Paul and Linda walked down the aisle, Nolene continued to criticize them from the TV screens. 5 years, you'll see. She'll leave him for someone young and rich, and he'll be left broke. Meanwhile, Linda had already begun to set up their new mansion in Hollywood, preparing it for the inevitable photo shoots and press visits. Her plans included rehearsals, Golden Globe Awards, premieres, and social dinners, whether at the White House or Buckingham Palace. She didn't even think about children. she had her career and many other important events ahead of her. After the stunning success of Crocodile Dundee, Linda Kozlowski dreamed of worldwide fame, but reality was far from her ambitions. Just 2 years after her marriage to Paul Hogan, she faced unpleasant changes. Her weight increased, and the press began to mercilessly criticize her appearance, calling her a big lady on ice. During a ski trip to Austin, reporters filmed her unsuccessful attempts to master skiing, and the footage spread through the tabloids. Linda tried to fight the changes, eating almost nothing, but still got fat. She kept hoping for bigger roles, calling her agent, looking for projects that could put her back on top. She was offered light comedies, but Linda wanted serious dramas like the one she had once performed on Broadway, playing Arthur Miller's traveling salesman in Death of a Salesman. Meanwhile, things were going great for Paul. His career was growing. He was full of energy and preparing for the release of the second Crocodile Dundee, which, although it did not achieve the success of the first part, still earned $70 million. Linda acted in the second installment, but felt increasingly insecure. In 1998, Linda and Paul had a son, Chance. This became a turning point in their relationship. At the time, Linda was 40 years old and Paul was 59. Paul, who was busy with work when he was young and missed important moments in the lives of their first children, now fully immersed himself in raising their son, determined not to repeat old mistakes. They sold their home in Hollywood and moved to Australia, where Paul enjoyed a quieter life, writing scripts and spending time with his son. However, in 2013, the couple announced their divorce, which came as a surprise to fans. The reasons for the breakup were little discussed, but there were rumors that the relationship was affected by Hogan's financial problems, caused by accusations of non-payment of taxes. Paul had to part with $10 million to settle the situation with the authorities. After the divorce, Linda returned her maiden name Kozlowski and decided to start a new life. She received about $7 million as payoff for her participation in Crocodile Dundee. This money she successfully invested in real estate in Italy, and also significantly improved her appearance through plastic surgery. Linda found new happiness in her personal life, entering into a relationship with a Moroccan with whom they started a tourist business. Paul Hogan, despite his age, remains active in the movie industry, starring and working on screenplays. In 2020, the movie The Magnificent Mr. Dundee was released, where he revisited the image that once made him a legend.